So even though there were a number of people telling us, Melissa, your best case scenario is to pay asking price and hopefully have no competition, Garrett and I were able to negotiate almost $50,000 below asking price, and here's how. Hey guys, Melissa Dargan here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel on personal finance. In this video, I'm going to share with you the 5 tips on how to negotiate for your home despite a hot housing market. Because Garrett and I were able to get our home almost $50,000 less than asking. That's right, $50,000 less than asking. And it is possible, we did it. And I'm going to share with you how you can do it too. And by the way, don't believe everything that you hear, that the best case scenario is for you to have no competition and pay listing price, because if you're looking for value, just like Garrett and I were, there are still ways to negotiate. Here's how. If you like a good deal just as much as I do, go ahead and hit that like button. Thanks for the support. And subscribe to my YouTube channel to learn more on personal finance. What's great is that it's free for you, and you'll be able to be updated whenever new videos on personal finance and housing and other topics that I talk about are released each week. To start, you have to understand what you're getting into when you're negotiating for a home. You can't just expect the seller to accept any low bid without reason. So here are 5 tips on how to successfully negotiate for the home that you want. Tip number 1, start by looking at homes that have been on the market for a while. You can't expect a home that's only been on the market for 3 days to go below asking price. You have to look at homes that have been sitting on the market maybe 3 weeks or 4 weeks or more, because those are the homes that now the seller is trying to sell. And so that gives you a great opportunity to put in a bid lower than asking price. Our rule was 21 days or 3 weeks. And we would strategically wait to put an offer in on a home once it hit after that 21-day mark. The median number of days that a home sits on the market here in Seattle in King County is 6. 6 days, and then the house goes pending. And so obviously if you're trying to extract value or negotiate for the price of the home, you probably are not going to be able to do that if you do it anywhere less than 6 days. Unless I guess you're coming in with an all cash offer, and that is a little different. In the ideal, you want to target homes that have been sitting on the market longer. A seller doesn't want their home to sit on the market for 21, 60, or 100 days. The longer the house sits on the market, the more costly it is to the seller. And this is where you gain leverage to hopefully negotiate for the home that you want. Typically with homes sitting on the market, there's this belief that the home may possibly have something wrong with it. But this is why you want to check and make sure that the fundamentals are good, because if not, that can get very costly real fast. Let's look at our example. The home we ended up buying went on the market November 30th, 2020. The first time we actually visited was December 15th. And while we liked the property, we did have our 21-day rule, so we decided to wait. And we waited until the end of the month, when on December the 29th, we decided to officially put in an offer that was lower than asking price, given how long it had been on the market. And one thing to note is it is new construction. So for us, we knew the foundations were going to be solid and the location was in a great area. So it hit all the check boxes, and we crossed our fingers and put in another bid lower than asking price. This brings us to tip number 2. Put in an offer within the realm of reason. Make sure you're looking at comparables to check what are other similar properties in the neighborhood going for as well. What have they sold for recently? What are they on the market for currently? Because that's going to give you a good idea of what you can now leverage in the offer that you're going to put in. I mean, you don't want to put in such a low bid offer that the seller is basically just going to not answer you back. And that can happen. Sometimes sellers don't even want to entertain someone who isn't serious about a bid. So you want to be sure that you're doing your comparable research and you're asking your real estate agent to provide you these data and number points so that you can put in a good offer that is still below listing price, but is reasonable and something that will get the seller to engage and maybe even open a dialogue into the negotiation. The original price of our home was $789,000. And after Garrett and I did initial research to find out what other comparables look like in the neighborhood, we found that homes that were around that price and a little bit higher were sitting on the market, some of them for over 100 days. Clearly, in my opinion, those homes were overpriced, and this gave us room to put in a lower bid and negotiate. Based on the knowledge that we gathered, we settled on $719,000 for our initial bid. And why? Because we could justify it with recent comparables, especially with a home that was sitting on the market for as long as it was. This also ties into our next tip, which is tip number 3, expect a counteroffer. This is why Garrett and I went on the lower end of the range of what we were willing to pay, because we expected that the seller would counteroffer and that we would have to go higher than what we initially wanted to pay in our lower minimum of $710 to $740. And so we figured if we go around $719, there's still wiggle room to then negotiate to get up to our maximum. And that way we can still stay within the range of what we wanted to pay, but let the seller feel like we negotiated to get to our maximum. For us, we did take a little bit of a gamble. $719 was on the lower end. However, I will say that the house had been on the market now for nearly 30 days at that point, almost a month. Other houses and comparables priced in the same range were sitting on the market for over 100 days. And you have to keep in mind that for the seller and these projects that are new builds, they don't want inventory sitting. The longer it stays as inventory and unsold, the longer that they're paying for it, and it's costly. So yeah, we took a little bit of a risk, but we calculated that with other projects sitting on the market for that long, if the seller wanted to engage with us and try and find a room for negotiation, they would, and $719 was our starting point. I do want to add that while you're trying to start this negotiation process, there is other competition out there. We were fortunate that no other competition came up, and so we were able to start to engage with the seller. However, we had a different bid, which ended up failing, where we went into a negotiation process, and in the midst of it, in one of our counter offer discussions, another offer came in that was higher and was going to pay all cash, and we lost that bid in the middle of negotiation. So just keep in mind that if you are trying to negotiate, you do run the risk of losing the bid if competition comes in and offers something better. To circle back to our story, the seller came back with $775. And that's still a huge gap from where we wanted to be, $719 to $775. That's a $55,000 gap. And let's say we came to our max of what we were willing to pay, $750 in total. That would still leave $25,000, something that we were not willing to pay. Which brings us to our next tip. Know the maximum price of what you're willing to pay, and if the seller is not able to meet you there, walk away. Our max price in total was $750,000 of what we were willing to spend for a 2-bedroom, 3-bath in that neighborhood. And while we liked the house, Garrett and I have already learned after having 3 failed bids that we cannot get emotionally invested in this transaction. We basically looked at it as an investment, and that if we weren't able to get it for the price that we wanted, we would walk away. No harm to us. I mean, because if it worked, wonderful, and we were so excited, but if it didn't, no sweat. We would hopefully then find another home, and as more homes come onto the market, we found that there's other homes that you will like for different reasons, and the right one will come your way. You just have to be patient. After speaking with our real estate agent, where we shared that ultimately our max is to pay $750,000 in total, and even the counter offer of $775 doesn't get us there, we were ready to walk away, and that's what we told her. So after that discussion and we hung up the phone, we thought, all right, we're done with that property, on to the next one. And Garrett and I actually started looking at other homes that we had liked and making a list of what we wanted to view for the following weekend. This brings us to our 5th and final negotiation tip: find a win-win scenario. Obviously, the seller wants to make a profit when they're selling their property, and the buyer, like you and me, want to get the best value when you buy your home. If sales price is a huge factor here, one secret tip of how you can get a win-win for both the seller and the buyer is to include the closing costs in the sales price. Let me show you how this all works out on the whiteboard. To help break down the win-win scenario where the seller can list a higher sales price and the buyer effectively pays less than what it was listed as sold, here's the breakdown. Let's say we had $750,000. Well, we'd have to add, if this was the sales price, closing, which is about $10,000 in that price range, and it would equal a total of $760,000. And that was out of question. That was not something Garrett and I were willing to spend on. So next, we can lower the price, and this is what the seller would post, $740,000. We would pay closing, and that would get us to the $750,000. However, what could be done as a compromise is if the seller wants the sales price to be $750,000, then the seller could also pay for the closing, meaning that this is money that the seller would cover instead of the buyer, us. So effectively, we would pay $740,000 even though the listing price is $750,000. It's because the seller would cover $10,000 of our costs, which technically then has an effective rate of $740,000 of how much we actually pay for the property. And what's great about this is that in this scenario, it's a lower sales price, which the seller wouldn't like ideally. They'd want it to be higher. And here, the sales price is higher, but the effective rate for the buyer is lower because the seller is covering $10,000 of the closing costs. And that's how you can find a win-win. That if the seller really cared about a higher sales price, they could list it that it was sold for $750,000 and that's what the contract says. But what it doesn't have to state is that the seller covered $10,000 of those closing costs. So effectively to the buyer, it ended up $740,000 in total, and that is what happened with our property. So those are the 5 negotiation tips that will help you during this hot housing market and hopefully get you a great deal on the house you're looking for. Keep me posted, and in the comments below, let me know how your housing search is going and if these tips helped you negotiate a better price for your home. Also, don't forget that if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. Thanks for the support. And subscribe to my YouTube channel to learn more on personal finance and be updated whenever new housing videos are released. See you in the next video. Wait, you're still here? Go ahead and check out these other videos on personal finance and housing that I think you'll enjoy. See you in the next video.